Not Quite Right features discussions that are unfiltered and uncensored and may include themes that are inappropriate for younger listeners. Also, I swear a lot.
Something doesn't seem quite right.
Welcome to Not Quite Right. My name's Ed.
And I'm Amanda.
And it's our fourth Daredevil for the July 2025 Not Quite Right prize.
Coming to the pointy end, as we like to say.
As we love to say around here. So our Daredevils are people who've signed up for the honour and privilege of being roasted on air on the podcast.
Why would you? That's the true question. But more importantly, why would you do it twice?
Yes, and our Daredevil today has done it twice.
Well, we'll have by the end of this.
If you want to be really particular with your tenses.
No, I do.
All right, so it's future perfect. Okay. So
I know I am.
Future perfect, present not so much.
I'm working on it.
So we'll be reading the story, we'll be talking about the story, we'll break it down, we'll share our thoughts, and hopefully we'll all learn something together in the process.
Sounds good.
So as a reminder, the prompts for this round were the word crane, the action prompt of burning something, and the anti-prompt of break the rule, use active voice. And our victim this round is back for a second time.
Yeah.
And that is Eilish Forwells, who was a Daredevil back in the January round this year, with her story, It's a Fool's Game.
And Eilish has actually made the shortlist previously.
She has.
With the tip of the tongue, the teeth, the lips, if you remember that story.
I definitely remember that story from back in October.
Multiple memorable stories and, in fact, some recurring themes.
I know. I was going to talk. Let's talk about those.
I'm excited to. All right. Well, let's hear the story.
And we've actually got Eilish's own recording of this story too.
Great.
So let's hear that now. This is Eilish Forwells with her story, The Teapot is Haunted.
Dylan's life was haunted by loss. Each morning he'd boil the kettle and place 2 cups of tea on the knotted wooden table. He'd sip his tea while the other grew cold. The chair opposite as empty as his existence had become. That was until the parcel arrived, unexpected and unmarked. A porcelain teapot patterned with majestic cranes. It came with brittle tea leaves and a yellow slip of paper, marked with slanted ink. Steep to speak with Gwen. It seemed impossible that something so ordinary could grant an audience with his dead wife. But grief and sorrow had brewed into a stout of desperation. So he put the kettle on. Steam curled from the spout, followed by the creaking, spindly legs of a porcelain crane. It clinked onto the table, feathers webbed with a delicate blue glazed cracks and eyes sharp as broken china. "Do you wish to have tea with Gwen?" it asked. "Or is it tea for one?" Dylan didn't hesitate. He poured tea into her favourite cup, and his heart stilled as she imprinted back into reality before him. Brushing fingers over the familiar freckle under her left eye, he cried. Relief flooded through him, infusing his heart with warmth. But the closer he looked, the harder it was to ignore. Her lips were too plump, or the freckle was dotted under the wrong eye. Sometimes her face blurred at the edges. He showed her pictures, vignettes of their faded life, trying to seep memories into her new skin. She felt so close. It tasted like the sweet second before a kiss mixed with sourness when it never came. Her features became stagnant. Her words turned bitter. Sometimes her body fell apart or dissipated like steam. Unwilling to let her go, he made tea for 142 mornings. But with every hopeful brew, she unravelled more. Her body reassembled wrong like forgotten folds in origami. Limbs askew, teeth piercing through flesh as scalding dregs dripped down. The last of his hope curdled in his mouth, and he smashed the pot against the wall. When he looked again, it was whole. The kettle was already whistling on the stove. The teapot couldn't be ignored, couldn't be escaped. The air would boil and shriek until he reluctantly placed 2 cups upon the table. Cursing the crane's false promise, Dylan shoved his hand over the spout. Skin seared and scalding water spat until his wedding ring fused to blistered flesh. He held on, biting back screams until the pain swallowed him whole. The next morning, as the tea leaves steeped, he turned his cut wedding ring through his fingers, staring at the vacant space beyond the crane. He placed the split loop on the knotted table and he surrendered. "I wish to have tea alone," he said, and the crane simply flew away out of the window and over the fields, its wings flapping with fading chimes. Dylan savoured his tea for one, sipped from her favourite cup.
So thank you, Eilish, for your story. And Eilish has left us a voicemail message as well, so we'll play that now.
Hello, it's Eilish Forwells from Scotland. My story, The Teapot Was Haunted, originally started out as the idea that a ghost story could be quite an interesting exploration of passive voice. You know, this idea of someone being passive as they are haunted by something. In this case, the idea was that they were haunted by the loss of their wife and by grief. I wanted to start out with something that was quite horrific and filled with darkness and horror, and I ended up getting worried that it had a serious lack of emotion, and I fear it ended up sort of in this awkward in-between where I couldn't quite cut out the horror and I didn't quite have enough emotion. But I love the idea and I love the concept, and dare I say it, I had a lot of fun writing it. So I'd be interested to see what you guys think, and you know, overall I just found it quite entertaining. The idea that I could write about tea.
We see right through you, Eilish. This is all one big scam to just write about tea. It's very British of you.
It is a recurring theme in your
Yes.
story. So in your last Daredevil story, which was A Fool's Game, there was a tea kettle featured prominently in that story as well.
And a dead wife, for that matter.
And a dead wife. So yeah, another recurring theme, and we hope you're okay, Eilish.
No, but it's a great recurring theme, by the way. And I think creatively, when you have something that you want to explore, like it's not always just like, oh, I did that, move on. It's like, no, these images are powerful to me and I want to express something about them. And I may not even be quite sure what when I first begin, but as I continue to do that, I'm actually honing my own perspective on exactly what it is I want to say. And I think that's really cool. I think it's nice, like, to be able to express what interests you. Yeah. And, you know, you said this was fun for you. And I think that's why, right? Like, you've leaned into exactly what inspires you and what lights you up. And I think that's always an amazing place to start. So I'm really happy to hear that.
And really interesting as well to hear your perspective on balancing these elements of horror versus emotion, because that's something that we don't get as readers. We don't see like what your motives are in the story. So yeah, really interesting. And maybe we'll see as we walk through the story whether some of those elements do come to the fore. And maybe let's start with the title, because it's like an unusual framing, and you normally just say like the haunted teapot, but obviously this is like leaning into the passive, framing it as the teapot is haunted.
Yeah.
Perhaps by zombies.
By zombies or by a ghost. Yeah, exactly. So we've left the subject until the end. And I'm starting to wonder, like, does Eilish have a haunted teapot?
That's making her write all these stories about teapots.
Yeah, no, it's a really cool idea. And this was one of the titles that I was like, ooh, what's that about? I want to read that one. So I think that's great. I would challenge maybe, does that title fit the tone exactly? Yeah. And I'm not sure that it does necessarily. It's kind of a little bit almost feels flippant in the way that I read it, and you don't have to read it that way. But the story that follows is, as Eilish indicated, like there's a horror element to it, and we're moving through with some pretty dark stuff. And haunted just has this kind of whimsical kind of tone to it at times to me. And I guess it's just how those two play off against each other. And I'm not sure that the story and the title like a match, even though like clearly the statement matches, but the actual feel of the title versus the feel of the story, whether those match. And I'm not sure that they do, not for me anyway.
Yeah, it's true. And I think it's something you've always got to balance, like how you respond to the prompts and like the cleverness of that response versus making sure that all of the elements of your story work together. And this is not a big criticism by any means. God, no. But yeah, just something to think about.
Yeah, I think like if I'm seeing that title, The Teapot is Haunted, I'm expecting almost like
Scooby-Doo or something.
Yeah, a little bit. Like not a comedy per se, but something a little bit quirky and more whimsical than perhaps this story was. But that's by the by, because I think the story is the element that we're most interested in here.
Okay, so let's step through it. Dylan's life was haunted by loss. Each morning he'd boil the kettle and place 2 cups of tea on the knotted wooden table. He'd sip his tea while the other grew cold, the chair opposite as empty as his existence had become. So this opening paragraph, I think, ticks, a lot of the boxes that we talk about. It names the character in the very first word. So big tick from Amanda on that one. We get our setting, which is important. Like, again, I've spoken on an earlier Daredevil about like you go into each story with this blank stage, like a dark stage, and the words help you fill that stage with a set, basically. And we get that straight away. We get that set filled. Yeah. And we're placed in like a living room or a sitting room or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Table and 2 cups of tea.
Yeah, I've found this to be quite a strong opening paragraph. I think, as you say, it does tick a lot of the boxes, including, by the way, that passive construction in the very first line, which if you're wanting to technically tick off the anti-prompt, good, done, tick already before you even begin. So huge points for this opening paragraph. Like I've definitely dropped into the scene at this point. And yeah, I think great job.
And yeah, we do quickly get into the action of the day. The parcel arrives, unexpected, unmarked, and a porcelain teapot patterned with majestic cranes, which is a great use of the word crane. It's just in a pattern. I don't think we saw that come up.
We saw it on some wallpaper.
Yeah.
And there might have been a couple of other things. But yeah, no, it wasn't super common. So it was nice to have that.
And it arrives with this yellowed slip of paper marked with ink, steep to speak with Gwen. And it's never explained where this comes from or anything like that. Like that's not the point of the story.
No,
just arrives and we deal with the repercussions. And look, that's an intriguing setup. Like we've established that he is grieving and dealing with this grief through tea. And here comes a haunted teapot. We know it's haunted because we've read the title.
Yeah, that's true. And that does help set up what we're looking at here. I would question, and again, there's another passive construction here, which is it came with brittle tea leaves and a yellowed slip of paper marked with slanted ink by zombies, steep to speak with Gwen. And I think this is an instance where, and we had in our article some of maybe the challenges of passive voice, and one of those is clarity. And I think that might have been an issue here for me because marked with slanted ink, even though that's like when I reflect back on it, that's a beautiful way of describing handwriting.
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't picture handwriting. I wasn't exactly sure what marked with slanted ink meant until it took me a moment is what I'm saying. And you always want to avoid any moment where the reader has to go, hang on what? Yeah. And that's all it was. It was just hang on what? Oh, right, got it. But you really want to avoid that. And so I think having that in a less passive construction would have helped that. Like, I guess we don't know. And this is the thing. We've used it here because we don't know who marked it with slanted ink. And so we've left off the actor here in this sentence, which is fair. But I do think that it could have been described differently in a way that was more clear. That's all I'm trying to say.
I don't actually think this is a problem with the passive voice. And I'll actually contradict you, Amanda.
How dare you?
Look, I think this sentence is actually an example of passive voice coming naturally because you would speak about like I bought a a microwave and it came with an instruction manual. You wouldn't say I brought a microwave and I don't know, and a man had placed that naturally flows as just an aside, like about the thing that's arrived. It's aside from the main point.
That wasn't a passive sentence, but anyway, go on about the microwave. I do.
Yeah. So,
but you're contradicting me, so I want to nitpick everything that you say.
All right, fair enough. No, but I think that passive construction works perfectly in that sentence. But I think the problem there is just with the use of the slanted ink to describe handwriting.
Yeah.
And it could just be slanted handwriting. And
it wouldn't sound as cool.
The passive voice wouldn't really matter.
No, I get you. It's probably not so much the passive voice here that's the issue. It's just the more abstract phrasing of marked with slanted ink. And look, I don't want to overdo this because I actually like that as a description. Yeah. I think it just needed that extra word or whatever it might be to just be very clear that what we're looking at, that's all. What I do love here though is this final piece, the steep to speak with Gwen. And now plenty of subtext there because we know who Gwen is already and you don't have to tell us, but we've got enough information here to understand that that's his wife. And so I think that's really wonderful and well done and allows you to have that beautifully concise sentence, steep to speak with Gwen, which is really has a nice feel to it as well, like a lyrical kind of quality. So that works perfectly.
So then it arrives, he decides, well, out of desperation, we do name an emotion there, I guess, out of desperation, and maybe there's some opportunities to do a bit of showing. We're kind of being told about his state of mind, which you want to avoid if possible, but it comes and goes fairly quickly. And so he puts the kettle on, steam curled from the spout, followed by the creaky, spindly legs of a porcelain crane. It clinked onto the table, feathers webbed with delicate blue glazed cracks and eyes sharp as broken china.
And that's such a cool image, right? The blue and white we know as a classic kind of China pattern kind of thing. But I guess one challenge I would have there is just how it's described that the crane kind of appears from the teapot because that isn't clear to me. And again, it's about picturing what's happening in this scene, giving me the information I need to watch it unfold. And so we say steam curled from the spout followed by the creaking spindly legs of a porcelain crane. Do they also curl from the spout? Yeah. Is the crane coming legs first out of the spout? And if so, how does its body then follow? I think that's an important enough question because cranes don't usually come feet first upwards, right? As the steam might rise from a spout. I feel silly even saying this, but, to be able to describe that in a way that allows me to picture the crane emerging, I'm not sure legs first, in the way it's phrased, is clear enough to me. How big is this crane? I don't necessarily need all that information, but I need enough to go, wow, crane's appeared. Because that description that follows is really cool, but I'm still back in, hang on, what? Spindly legs and, that kind of thing. And so I think it just needs that little bit more description, that little bit more visual detail around how exactly this crane emerges. I don't know if you agree. Did you feel that was...
No, I agree. I mean, look, I wasn't really sure the image that was trying to be conveyed here. I mean, we have this, we know it's a crane pattern, but how the crane followed, it seems to describe a movement and maybe it is being a haunted teapot, maybe the crane is moving, but did the crane leave the teapot? It's not really clear.
Yeah, we've got a crane pattern on the teapot. Is it stepping out of the pattern? Yeah. That's not how I'm picturing it, but it's blue and porcelain but it's also emerging from the teapot like steam. So it's a few mixed metaphors, I guess, is probably the issue. And I would have liked to just very clearly it be one of those things so that I can really picture it because I think it's a cool visual.
Yeah. Do you wish to have tea with Gwen, it asked, or is it tea for one? Dylan didn't hesitate. He poured tea into her favourite cup and his heart stilled as she imprinted back into reality before him. Brushing fingers over the familiar freckle under her left eye, he cried. Relief flooded through him, infusing his heart with warmth. Which is a lovely image. Just another call out there about naming the emotion of relief and maybe an opportunity to show, don't tell there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're it's a part way there, relief flooded through him as opposed to he felt relief.
Yeah,
we're taking that extra step and to me that's probably enough of a step. It doesn't always have to go the whole hog with a full description of every action. But, again, anytime you see yourself naming an emotion, it's a good opportunity to just reflect, could I express this in more active terms, either through dialogue or body language or behaviour. But yeah, we have another participle hanging participle phrase here or what have you. Brushing fingers over the familiar freckle under her left eye, he cried. And, this is our little darling now that we've latched onto this round because now we're learning about grammar. And maybe this comes down to a personal style and authorial voice kind of thing. And I think by all means, take this as you wish and ignore it if you want to. But my recommendation would be to state that in simpler terms, these actions, so that we can follow them in sequence. I think that's usually better for clarity and for flow, reading flow. But, again, if you want to take that sort of more mystical kind of vibe, like I get that too. So it's entirely up to you.
Yeah, I do agree. I will say in this sentence, though, where we don't have an issue with, the owner of the action not matching up. So brushing fingers over the familiar freckle under her left eye, he cried. There's nothing else that it could be apart from him who's brushing the fingers and crying. So we don't have that same confusion as we might if those are two different things.
It's more just a question around the sequence of events for me, that's all.
But the closer he looked, the harder it was to ignore. Her lips were too plump or the freckle was dotted under the wrong eye. Sometimes her face blurred at the edges. He showed her pictures, vignettes of their faded life, trying to seep the memories into her new skin.
I quite like this. I got this kind of almost AI vibe from this, an AI image where the 6 fingers and what have you, that each time she comes back, she's coming back a little bit less her and a little bit more of a mess, basically, which is, again, a recurring theme from the previous story in which we had this man trying to reconstruct his wife, where each time he tried, he's kind of getting further away from her essence. And that's what is happening here. And I really like that. I think what I would potentially challenge is, you said at the opening, Ed, we've described like a pattern of events, and we're getting there again now. So we've moved and we've just described a scene. He said the cranes appeared, and so you're going to have tea for one or with Gwen. And he's like, with Gwen, and then Gwen appears, but then now all of a sudden it's like, well, we're multiple teas in now, it seems. And then we get into the next section, unwilling to let her go, he made tea for 142 mornings. But you never actually sort of clarified prior to that, we've moved from this one scene to now it's a new scene and like multiple times that they're encountering each other. It's almost like it's all happening in the room at once. And I think that, it wouldn't take much to just say, and the next day or whatever it might be, the next cup of tea brought a new change or whatever, however you might want to describe it, that leads us into the next time period, because otherwise it's just blended a little bit too much. And again, what are we picturing? Like, is he still in the room with her or has he left and come back? Like, these are important things, I think. Has he made a new cup of tea before the freckle changes? Is she getting worse with each cup of tea? And I think that's how I'm understanding it, but it just needed to be phrased a little bit more clearly, I think.
Yeah, look, and I completely agree, and I have the same notes here as we get into this next sentence. She felt so close it tasted like the sweet second before a first kiss, mixed with sourness when it never came. Her features became stagnant, her words turned bitter, sometimes her body fell apart or dissipated like steam. And some of those are lovely. I love that idea of the first kiss and then the sourness when it never came. That's a really lovely image. But you're right, it is moving away. We're getting kind of away from the present into this flowing future and multiple interactions, because sometimes her body fell apart or dissipated. But when is this? Because we've only just
had one time.
It's just started. Like she's just appeared.
Yeah.
And so we're taking out of the scene. I think we need to see these details that come out play out in the interaction of the scene. And I guess we go on about this idea of staying in the scene and showing us what's happening in the scene. And it's not just because like we're sticklers to this idea, but it's really, again, removing that distance between the reader and the character and letting us observe what is taking place. And when you start introducing these elements of like, this is recurring, it actually happened again later and it was the same thing, we kind of get lost, and we're a step back now, or we're several steps back, looking now not into a scene, but into like this montage idea or like a compilation of scenes that are playing out in front of us.
Yeah, and I think in this case, it's as simple as moving up that line with unwilling to let her go, who made tea for 142 mornings. So we could have that tight scene where she begins to dissipate. Yeah. And he's like, I'm not ready to let you go. And he's now going to make 142 cups of tea or morning's worth of tea. And that's when she starts to fall apart a little bit and get further from her essence. And it's very much a case of just moving that line up. Yeah. And, I think that is an artful way to express a passing of time. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. To say there were 142 mornings and this happened, I think that's a perfectly valid way to move us through that period to then come to where he gets to by the end and that change in him.
Yeah. I would question though, I feel like a story can be told differently depending on the medium that you're telling it in. And this story as it's written for this comp, I feel can be elaborated on for like a longer piece, because it's got that recurring activity. It's got kind of all this playing out. But if we're talking about 500 words, I do feel there's an opportunity for that action to happen within the scene. Like even though it is in the story, we've got 142 mornings, it doesn't need to be that way. I feel like that scene could play out with the Teapot arrives, he conjures up his wife, they have a lovely interaction, he starts to notice things aren't right, he freaks out, he throws the kettle away, just tries to destroy it. This could potentially play out in a scene. And I think when you look at writing for different competitions and different mediums, that's the kind of kill your darlings choice that might need to be made just to make the story fit the flash fiction format.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's a question we should always ask ourselves with a piece of flash fiction. Can I condense this into a single setting and a single scene? And you won't always be able to, but you're right. I think this one can. And I think when you do that, ironically, it makes it more powerful. Like you think if I've done it for 142 mornings, it must be more and more meaningful. But in fact, for a reader who's only with you for these 500 words, packing all of that intensity into a single scene can actually be more impactful and feel more rich, in a way that you might imagine it's more rich when you offer like this extended period of time. So always something to think about, always challenge, like I've started in one room and I've walked to the next. Can we just be in the next room? I've crossed one period to the other. Why don't we just start at the start of this scene? Like all of those questions I think are really important questions to ask yourself.
Yeah. But with every hopeful bruise, she unravelled more, her body reassembled wrong like forgotten folds in origami. And I just wanted to call that out because you mentioned previously like origami came up again and again, even though it wasn't a crane.
Yeah, another one. So it's funny, isn't it? But oh God, I love this paragraph. Like I love the horror bit that we're getting into here. The language is really great. Go on, read more.
Limbs askew, teeth piercing through flesh as scalding dregs dripped down. The last of his hope curdled in his mouth and he smashed the pot against the wall.
Like, that's so good.
So, it's taken a turn there, a dramatic turn, which I love. Like, it's not just things have gone well now that he's had the teapot or like it didn't turn out how he'd hoped, boo-hoo. Like, things have taken this sinister turn where it's the monkey paw kind of thing.
Totally. And again, I think you're right. This could be condensed into one quite intense scene where, she starts to unravel and he's like, I regret everything. What have I done? This horrifying thing in front of me is like not my wife and get her away from me. Like that reaction could be really, really powerful. And it is, but I think just that domino effect of this happens and that happens, I think you could really pack that in.
Yeah, it is a bit diluted because it happens over such a long time.
But still cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know what? Do it more. Give us more of that. Like if you're going to do it, like, my best friend Poe, make it all like that. And it is like that crane with its like clinking onto the table. Like that's cool. Like just if the whole thing can just feel like that, I think like you'll be doing really, really well.
So when he looked again, it was whole. The kettle was already whistling on the stove. The teapot couldn't be ignored, couldn't be escaped. The air would boil and shriek until he reluctantly placed the 2 cups on the table. So, like, again, little opportunity to more show, less tell. Just around the teapot couldn't be ignored, couldn't be escaped. Like, show us that the fact that it's relentless against him. And
we've seen that. We've seen it. Like, the teapot's back. He smashed it. It's back. That's the moment. That's the showing moment. You don't need to restate that to us. Yeah, for sure. I think the second part of this, that the air would boil and shriek until he reluctantly placed the 2 cups on the table, that implies like would boil, that it would like on multiple occasions show us it boiling and shrieking in this one moment, I think is important.
And also how Dylan responds to that immediately in the scene, that's happening to him and he's trying to deal with it.
Yeah, because we go on to say cursing the crane's false promise. Like show it, like give him screaming or like you know, he smashed the pot. That didn't work.
Yeah.
What's he going to do now? Like scream at it? I don't know. Try and exorcise it from the teapot.
Yeah, and that's definitely a moment that I feel needs to be shown, cursing the crane's false promise. I think we've spoken about it as well in the last Daredevil, just that moment where the reader has to kind of fill in the gaps of what he said.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I do love this again, where like skin seared and scalding water spat until his wedding ring fused to blistered flesh. He held on, biting back screams until the pain swallowed him whole. This is great. Like, this is great stuff. I think you write horror well and beautifully, and I think you could lean into that skill.
Yeah, absolutely. And the shortlisted story, the tip of the tongue, the teeth, the lips, did that as well. That had that horror element, that kind of spooky sideshow vibe as well.
Absolutely.
The next morning, as the tea leaves steep, he turned his cut wedding ring through his fingers, staring at the vacant space beyond the crane. He placed the split loop on the knotted table and he surrendered. I'm not familiar with that cut wedding ring. Is that a thing?
No, he cut it off because it burned to his finger. But in fact, like I marked that. Like, why did we skip that bit? Because it's an important part. Like, if he's going to cut the ring from his finger, we kind of just jumped over that. And now he's putting a cut ring on the table. And you've just expressed that confused you. And that was something I had to go back myself. Like, I get it now, but I had to go back, hang on, cut ring. And it's cut loop, right? It's cut loop, not even cut ring. So you've got to sort of put those pieces together. And that does, again, just break that flow a little bit. So being a bit more clear that he cuts it off.
Yeah.
And again, can we pack that into that scene? Cut it off then and there.
Yeah, because that's not a trivial thing to like cut a wedding ring. It requires a fair amount of strength and force.
And also emotional, like, you know, investment in like, I'm actually letting my wife go.
Yes.
Like, that's what we imagine, the emotion attached to this action. But we don't see it. We don't see him wrestle with cutting this ring and what that means to him, like he's actually letting his wife go. And I think that's an important part.
Yeah.
I think if we're going to mention it, then show it for sure.
Okay, and then we reach the conclusion. I wish to have Tina alone, he said, and the crane simply flew away, out of the window and over the fields, its wings flapping with fading chimes. Dylan savoured his tea for one, sipping from her favourite cup. So I feel like with this ending, he gets away very lightly and inexplicably because he can't get rid of this teapot. Like it's hunting him. And then all of a sudden he just says, you know, leave me alone, which he must have already said somewhere along the lines, and it leaves him alone. So I feel like there needed to have been like a stronger action that he took or something that he discovered about the situation that led him to finally beat that teapot, and it needed to come from like not just have been an arbitrary thing, because just saying leave me alone was very arbitrary. Yeah. The way he dealt with the teapot needed to be the payoff of something that happened earlier so that we get like that satisfaction in that ending. But I did enjoy the final sentence where he savoured his tea for one, sipped from her favourite cup, because that does demonstrate the change that has taken place in the scene, that he's like let her go to some extent and now he's drinking from her cup.
Yeah, I think that's well done. Like it's rounded, but I do think it could be a little bit enhanced. So my comment on this ending, it's probably similar to yours in that way. It's like it felt rushed. Like we've had all this build up and it's intense and then it's just over. Yeah. And I think the focus here should be on what's the emotional catalyst here. And to me, the emotional catalyst is the letting go of his wife finally. Yeah. And if we point everything to that, I think we will have a more satisfying ending. So it's not about having tea for one. You know, it's not about telling the crane to go away. It's about him wrestling with the demon of not being able to let his wife go. And I think that's what we need to come back to. Like if we come back to character and we come back to emotion, I think we'll be able to enhance the impact of this story, because what's the problem with not letting your wife go? That's the question. What is the problem? Well, nothing necessarily. But if he is becoming unhinged, you know, and if him not letting go means he can't move on, and these other ideas that come along with grief and how it holds us in static, I guess, in one place and doesn't allow us to move on, like we can explore those emotional themes through this story, and I think that would make it feel richer. And this horror that forces him to confront like the grief head on and realize, hey, I'm trying to keep my wife around, but this is not my wife. Like she's not right. And I can never actually get my real wife back, and I have to accept that. Like, these emotional themes are what are really resonant with people, and like, it's cool to have a horror story, and on a level that's going to be like satisfying. Like, oh, that was like cool and fun and cool imagery. But it's that deep human fear that if you tap into that of being lonely or letting go, these things that, universal experiences, if you can tap into that, then like you're really going to have something quite powerful that people connect with on a deeper level.
Okay, well, should we move on to the prompts?
Yeah, let's do it.
So we've covered them a little bit, but the teapot had a crane pattern and in some shape or form contained a living crane that erupted from the teapot and landed on the table and spoke. What
I would have liked with that crane was for it to mean a little bit more to him. So we have this haunted teapot arrive mysteriously. Like, why is it not Gwen's favourite teapot that's haunted? Like, why is it not the memory trapped in an object that they used to have tea together, or she used to have tea every day? And so now when he sees that thing, she's in it. No, we've got a teapot that's kind of just appeared on the doorstep and it's Amazon. Disconnected. Well, from Temu probably.
So that was a good pun.
It's what?
Temu.
Why?
Because tea.
Oh, fucking hell. Yeah, no, I'll take credit for that one. But yeah, like, let's bring that in. Like, let's really bring that home and make it mean more. And I think we know crane is the word prompt, and so it does have the tendency to feel a little bit tacked on if you don't pay it off in that way. So opportunity there to really run with that.
And so the action in this case, the burning action, was his finger, and which featured prominently, but as we said, like, maybe could have been developed to really enhance like the drama and the stakes, I guess, of the scene. But
also the irony, because if it's the steam from the teapot that's burning him, like we can make more of that emotionally, like, and how that, Gwen would never do that to him. Yeah. So now the teapot's burning him, like scolding him, and he's just trying to get closer to her, but he's getting further away. Like, all these are ideas are things that we can add to that as well.
And finally, the anti-prompt. In this case, we've got marked down as faithful because there are some passive sentences here. And as we called out, like perhaps the title, most prominent of those. I think in a lot of the stories that we've read with our daredevils, there's kind of this added element of passivity in the characters. Obviously, he was a little bit passive given the grief.
Well, I mean, there is also the question of like, well, Gwen doesn't have a voice in this story. So it's potentially her who's, not using an active voice. And I think, that's a bit of a shame, really, because he doesn't actually so much interact directly with her. He does brush his fingers over her freckle and but that's about it. And there's no... Don't.
So how did you read my mind?
Because you smirked at me. So he does brush his fingers over her face, but he doesn't sort of talk to her. He's talking to the crane instead. And I think, it probably needed to have more of a direct interaction between him and Gwen. And, I don't know if that's influenced by this passive voice idea, but could have enriched it a little bit more, and explored their relationship a little bit more through that as well.
We don't really know too much about their relationship apart from the fact that he's mourning her and that tea was a big part of their lives as well, I guess, is the other thing we know.
Yeah. So they're British as well.
We could have gone a little bit deeper there. Yeah. Well, thank you, Eilish, and thank you for pouring your heart out onto the page.
Oh, my God.
Like 2 cups of tea, and I hope that we provided some insight and given you some actionable feedback that you can use to take forward in your writing journey.
Yeah, and, we love your writing, so this was another one of those stories where it's like, look, it's really great. It's got so much to love about it, and I guess there were things to us that could have been elevated a bit more and which probably would have landed it on the long list, almost certainly. So not far off, and a really interesting exploration of grief. And I'm not sure if you're done with your teapot grief stories.
You could make it into a trilogy at this point.
A collection. But, we welcome them, and it is a very compelling image. And thank you. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for allowing us to share it with all our listeners as well. And once again, braving the fire and the scalding temperatures of this daredevil. We hope it hasn't seared too deeply into your skin and scarred you too much because, we love your work and we want to see more of it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eilish. And we'll be back in a week's time with our 5th and final daredevil for this round. So until then, right on.
Right on.
We hope you enjoyed this special Daredevil episode of Not Quite Right. If you have thoughts on this story, Follow us on social media and join the conversation. And if you'd like to participate in the next round of the competition, head over to our website at notquiteright.com. That's WRITE.
Something doesn't seem